In this lesson, we're going to turn our project into a portfolio item. We're going to do this by upgrading our README, adding screenshots and explanations, and by publishing a working version of our application. This will then be something we could show off to others and include in our portfolio. Now, this is lesson number 5 in our complete course on building a Postman clone app. This course has been designed to be beginner-friendly and an example of what you might put in a portfolio. Although, don't just directly put this course in your portfolio. Your portfolio needs to be uniquely yours, not just a copy of someone else's work. If you want to go further in C#, I would encourage you to go to iamtimcorey.com and check out the Dev Pass. Once you get the Dev Pass, I'd recommend starting with a master course to get job ready, and then fill in your gaps with one or more of the dozens of topic-specific courses that are included. The Dev Pass will get you up to speed and keep you up to date in your software development career. Okay, let's jump over to our application, and here we have our application built as we ended it last time. What we're going to do is, let's close all of this. What we're going to do is do some work in GitHub, because right now our GitHub doesn't have a lot in it. Now let's look at the current state of our GitHub repo, and there's nothing in the README, it's just code. Now, remember, just so you know, that this is a private repository, so it's marked private up here because I'm not giving the source code away. I want you to follow along and do it yourself. Now, when this eventually ends up in the Dev Pass, the source code will be there, but my goal is for you to follow along, not just copy what I do, because I want you to practice it. Okay, so what we're going to do is make this better and turn this into something when a prospective employer lands on this, they see exactly what this is, how it works, more information about what's in it, and so on. Because if you just give an employer this and say, hey, here's a portfolio piece, well, it's something, right? But if I'm not going to install this, because first of all, as an employer, I don't have time to necessarily go through and install everyone's portfolio pieces, figure out how to make them run, look through the code, and so on. But I might browse the code. And so I kind of pop it open here and look and say, okay, we got just one form, and that form, well, I can't see it in GitHub, but that's what it's going to look like. Looks pretty simple. So I kind of browse around, go class library. Okay, there's something there. API access. Okay, there's some code there, but not a whole lot. So it doesn't look very impressive. And, that can be a real bummer if you're showing off something and your potential employer goes, it's all right. You don't want that. You want them to, feel like, wow, this is really something. And so what we're going to do is create that so it really feels like it's really something. So we're going to do some work here today to make this look good. And one of the questions that come up a lot is, but I have a desktop app. How could I ever show it off in a portfolio? I'm going to show you how to do that. Okay, so let's go ahead and start doing some work. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the folder that this is located in, which that opens up a screen, but there we go. There's the folder it's located in. And then I'm going to create a new folder in here, and let's call this images. Okay, I put some images in the images folder, but what images? Well, I want screenshots. I want to see this app running. So I'm going to grab a screenshot of this, and to do that, I'm actually going to minimize my my Visual Studio because I don't want to accidentally catch a little bit there. My desktop just has my company logo there, so I can kind of hide that, and then grab a screenshot. I don't have to worry too much about catching that black on the edge. So let's grab a screenshot. So Control-Shift-S for me. I'm going to kind of position this. I'm going to drag it out. I don't have to be ultra precise here, but I grab something. Okay. And what that does is it creates for me a screenshot. Boom. I will save this. And where do I save it? Well, I want to save it in the same location where I have my my other stuff, which I believe is in practice. And there's lots of practices in here, but it's in the Postman clone app. Images. Okay. So I'm going to paste this. I'll call this screenshot 1. And I will close that. And then I am going to paste in the URL here, which I actually don't have. Okay, let's try this again. There we go. And I'm going to run this. And there's our formatted JSON. And now I'm going to screenshot it again. So let's grab another screenshot, roughly the same dimensions here. And again, grab this. We're going to save this. It's again going to try to save it, in my folder here. But let's go back to practice and Postman clone images. And let's call this screenshot 2. And that's it. So now we have 2 screenshots of our application so that we can show something off, show it actually working. We don't need screenshots of code because of the fact that we already have the code in the portfolio. But now we have 2 images to upload. In fact, if we go over here to get changes, you'll see that we now have those 2 images that have been added. We'll add those in just a minute. The other thing I want to do is right-click my project, my WinForm project, and say publish. You don't publish your library, you publish your WinForm app, which will take your library with you. Okay, I'm going to publish to a folder. Hit next, folder again, hit next, and yes, .NET 8 will leave the path alone, hit finish. But then once I do it, I hit close, and I come down here to show all settings. And in here, I am going to kind of tweak some things. Let's expand this out a little bit. I'm going to, yes, say .NET 8 Windows, any CPU, but instead of framework dependent, I want self-contained. What this will do is it will bring .NET 8 with my application, which means you don't have to make sure that .NET 8 is installed on the computer that you're running on. You can just run your application. My target run time is going to be Win64. And I'm going to produce, notice this little drop down here, or expanding box. I'll expand this a little more. I'm going to produce a single file. I'm not going to do ready to run compilation. Ready to run, what it does is it tries to kind of reorganize the code to be a little faster on startup. I'm not going to do that because that can cause some bugs and issues, and we don't need it for this application. So a single file will make a larger file, but at the same time, when a person were to run this file, it just runs. You don't need anything extra with it. Let's hit save and then publish. And this was going to create a publish profile and actually create for us our executable at this point. We can open the folder. And here we do have a bunch of extra files here, but honestly, you can delete them all. Now I'll delete these and I will delete these. Notice there's 2 PDB files. These are for kind of deconstructing your executable when you want to debug, even in production. If you try to use a different PDB than the one the one that was created when you created your exe, it won't work right because you have to. They're kind of matched pairs. So just note that if I were going to actually publish this, I'd probably keep those PDB files and maybe even put it on a symbol server so I could more easily debug a production app. But I'm not going to. Okay, hit delete. Notice that this file is basically 150 megabytes. So yes, that's a larger file. I'm not overly concerned about it because it's self-contained. It has everything .NET needs. We didn't do any kind of trimming or slimming it down to only exactly what we needed. It's bringing .NET along for the ride. I'm not worried about it. 50 megabytes really in computing terms currently is nothing, and trying to spend time making it smaller in this context isn't worth it. Okay, so let's kind of move this off the screen. Now we have this. Let's go back to get changes. Notice there's still just those 2 screenshots. Let's go ahead and upload the screenshots first. So add application screenshots. And I'll commit those and push up to GitHub. Now, I could do this next step in a couple different ways. I'm going to do it. I'm debating if I do it in VS Code, which I really like. This is my personal preference. Whenever I'm working with something that is web-based, like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, or is markdown, like a .md file, like a readme file, I typically will work with VS Code. So it's very quick to install. It's powerful. It has a lot of nice preview stuff. But for this, I think what I'll do is just come over here and use GitHub itself. So we can refresh. We now have the images, which means that if we edit this README, we can pull from these images. So it's images, screenshot 1, images, screenshot 2. So now let's start working on this README. Now notice if I were to bring in an image, we can kind of just demonstrate this. Let's create exclamation point. We say this is our Postman clone app ready to run. And then we can put in parentheses our path, which is images/screenshot1.png. And then quotes, if we wanted to, we can give it a title like ready to run. Like so, and we can preview this, make sure it works. And there we go. We have a preview of our image on the README. But of course, that's not how you just create a README. Just throw a couple images, good to go. But we have an example of what we're going to do. So let's start modifying this. So I'll first of all call it Postman clone. And maybe we should call it one word Postman clone. Yeah, Postman clone. I prefer 2 words. You can kind of, play around with it, figure out what works for you. But what we're going to do is put in here a really concise description of what this app is about. So say Postman. Let's zoom in here, by the way. Sorry. There we go. You can actually read the text now. Great. Much better. I know you're probably yelling at the screen. Postman clone provides a user-friendly interface for making GET requests to APIs and viewing the responses in formatted JSON. Ideal for developers and testers. This tool simplifies API interaction and debugging, helping you efficiently validate and troubleshoot your API calls. Okay. Now, yes, I worked on it beforehand. I didn't just come off the top of my head and just, spew out that paragraph. That takes a little bit of work to get done. But what this does now is it gives you a very precise, very concise reason why this app exists. Now, you probably don't want to say, just to show off I can do it. You probably want to have a little bit more reason behind why you built something and, why it exists. Like, okay, I wrote code and it works. That's not really useful as a portfolio item. You could do it, but really you want to have some kind of reason why a person might use this code. In this case, it's a user-friendly interface for making GET requests to API for viewing the response in formatted JSON. Okay, that's the reason it exists. Now here's kind of the pitch. Okay, this is why it exists, but now here's why a person might be interested. Well, it's ideal for developers and testers because it simplifies the interaction debugging, helping you efficiently validate and troubleshoot your API calls. Now, is this better than Postman? Well, if you're just doing GET calls, I would say maybe, because it's really simple. And you know what? Yes, Postman has a ton of bells and whistles. Or you can go into the dev tools in your browser and make a GET call. Or you can just go right to your browser and put the URL in and make a call. But maybe this has a better reason for existing. Maybe this provides a different way to efficiently validate and troubleshoot your calls. So it has a reason for existing even if other things exist in the market at the same time. And also, don't forget, you don't have to make your portfolio item to be the best in the world. There could be things that are better other places. You could say, you know what? When you talk to a person, hey, I was making this tool because I wanted to figure out how this is done, and that's what I came up with. And you know what? That's fine, because you don't have to make the best in the world. You just have to show off that you can do it and give the viewer something to look at and go, wow, that's kind of cool. You built this. Even if it's not the best, you still built this. So that's what we're doing here. We're getting a very clear reason why this exists. Okay. Next up, what I'm going to do is I am going to say two hashtags means H2 whenever you're building a web page. This is a pet peeve because it's a real thing that people get wrong. They don't understand what these are. H1 is the one hashtag, H2 is two hashtags, and so on in Markdown. But when it comes to building a web page, you only ever want one H1 on a page. You want one, but only one. This is like the page title. This describes the overall page. But then anything else has to be an H2 or below. And it's like an outline to a paper. So H2 would be like one of your main points. Okay, so yes, this is important. It's important to do it right. These are not just things to make different size fonts. Don't just use it for size. That's not what they're there for, please. Okay, sorry, rant over for now. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is say technologies used. And then in here, I am going to have C#, .NET 8, WinForms, and then we have the API call using HTTP client. Okay, so that gives us a bullet point list of, hot topics. Like if you were applying to a job where you're going to work with C# and .NET, well, this shows the person looking, hey, this is done C#. That way they don't go, was it done in VB.NET or C#? I have to look. Or what version of .NET did they use? It's all right here, really quickly accessible. This is kind of like the way to allow someone to really quickly scan your portfolio item to go, yep, good, done. Okay, rather than having them, have to spend time to figure things out. Don't make them figure it out. Be really clear up front. Okay, so technology is used. That's the next section. Now in this next section, let's call it, oops, I don't want to get a space in between. Using the app. Try not to have spelling errors. Try to, watch your casing, that kind of stuff. Make sure this is professional. This is not just something you want to slap together. You want it to actually be something that's, looks good. Okay, so we're going to start with maybe step 1 and say download the executable file from the release section. We're going to put that there. It's not there yet. Then what we're going to do is say we want to, when the application launches, it should look like this. And then we're going to say for 3 period, fill in your API URL and hit, what's the button? Is it go? Or is it run? Let me pull up the code here. It is go. So, and then we're going to paste in another image. And this one is Postman clone app results. Run results. And this will be screenshot 2. Now, these screenshots are probably too big, but let's use the Postman app. When the application launches, it should look like this. Fill in your API and hit go. There we go. And we could probably, if you want to be a little tongue-in-cheek, I'm not sure I prefer not to usually. We could say something like, hire me. That's step 4. Okay. So you could do something like that if you want to be a little tongue-in-cheek. I'm up to you. You could put your contact information in here if you want, but we're not going to because you don't need my contact information. So next up, I'm going to put one more section. In this section is upcoming changes. And this depends if you want to number order it or not. You could number order, or you could just put, the stars, which of course turn into bullet points. But upcoming changes. What are you planning on doing? Adding, post, put, patch, and delete functionality. Adding API headers. And what else? Handling API authentication. Adding dependency injection. And adding logging, because it'd be nice to have some logging on this application, make sure it works. I think those are some good things. Maybe we could add one more, which might be create a web-based user interface for the application. Okay, so now what we have is a more complete portfolio item. Let's go ahead and zoom back out here and go to preview. So this is now what will be our file for Markdown. It's very clear what the Postman clone app does. There's our really clear 2-sentence description. Again, do not put paragraphs here. Be very concise. Okay, if you can't describe it in 1 to 2 sentences, then it's too complicated an app, or you need to work on cutting things down. Okay, because I can tell you if this is paragraphs, no one's reading it. Just not going to happen. Okay, so it's kind of like your resume. So there's your title. There's the technologies used, which ones they use. Here's how to use it. I think we should shrink these screenshots down, but we can work on that next. And then you just hire me. And then upcoming changes. So you know what's coming with this app next. So this is a very clear, description of what this application does and kind of shows off how this works. So we're getting pretty close. I think we can commit these changes. This README will change over time, okay? Because right now we say that it only does GET requests. Well, eventually it's going to do the rest. So that's going to change. But for now, we get something up and running. Yes, we can change it over time, but for now, we have something to show off while we're continuing to work on this portfolio item. So commit changes. I'm going to say update README is a little generic. Let's say create portfolio item information in README. And I'll leave this extended description blank. Yes, I'll leave my right to the branch and hit commit. And so there we go. So now we come here to our application. It fills it out and gives a much better view on what our application looks like, what it does, what technologies it uses, and where it's going. So a lot clearer here, a lot better. But we don't have our executable yet. Let's go ahead and do that. So create our first release over here, right in this section. Click on the blue link here to create a release. And we can choose a tag. We don't have one. So let's create a tag. And let's create a tag on publish. So we're going to say v 0.0.1. Or, 0.1. Yes, you could do semantic and go full, 3 versions. It's up to you. But we don't want to say version 1 necessarily, unless you want to say, this is kind of a version 1. I'm okay with that because it is a working application. So let's call it that. We're going to create version 1 on publish. We're going to call this MVP release. Minimum viable product release, and this release signifies the initial working version of the Postman clone application. Okay, you could do more than that. You could have more information about what was in the release and so on, but let's leave it there for now. I don't want you to kind of get bored of watching me type. Now we can come over here and grab our Postman clone UI, which, by the way, I'm going to rename this to just Postman clone. It grabs a UI from the name of the form. So Postman clone is fine. And I'm going to drag that binary right here, and that's going to upload that binary into this release. And now I'm going to publish the release. It's not a pre-release. It's just going to be published. So now there is your Postman clone.exe as well as your source code zipped up as well, which means you come back over here to your repository. You can see release. We're on the minimum viable product release, which is the latest right now. You can click on that and get your executable. And it's 146 megabytes. So that's it. There's the way to turn your repo into a portfolio item, which you could then put into an overall portfolio and show off. And really, if you only have one of these, you can just say, hey, here is my portfolio item, and just share this link. Or if a hiring manager says, hey, have you ever done WinForms? You can share just this URL and say, hey, check it out. And it stands on its own. It explains what it does. It's very clear. It has nice imagery, even though we could make them better. But nice imagery, nice layout. It's very, very clear and concise. It's not overly wordy. It's not going into paragraphs of explanation that no one's going to read. It's all right here. Okay, so that's how I would recommend at least starting your portfolio item. You can make it even better than this. You can clean it up even more, but this is a really good foundational place to start, and it will put you ahead of probably about 99% of people when it comes to what they have in their portfolio. I've seen a lot of portfolios, and I've seen even more people who have no portfolio. But when people do have a portfolio, it's usually not to this level. It's usually not explained well. There's just kind of code there with no explanation or how it works or screenshots or where they're going with it or when they built it or who they built it with. That's important because if you, let's just say, this is why I encourage you not to do this, but if you were to put in a group project, this is typically what I see from people who are newer. They take their group project from school and they put that as a portfolio item. But now I have no clue what you did. Now I can go look at the commits, but that doesn't really tell a whole story unless I really dive deep into tracking what you were doing compared to everybody else. So you would really need to be specific here on what you did, what your part was, and why it's in your portfolio. I prefer that you not even put that in your portfolio item because I want you to create your own. That way I don't have to wonder, are you just riding off of somebody else's coattails or are you the ones doing most of the work? So just make your own. Okay, so that's how to put a portfolio piece together. That's how to create your app and upload it and set it all up. Really, at this point, we could call this good, but of course, we're not going to do that. We want to make it even better. We want to be able to make this application work better, to have more features and functionality and so on, and we're going to do that. Okay, so once you got this set up, then I want you to figure out, what do you think the next step should be? And it wouldn't hurt to kind of pause the video and think about it, because you should be thinking through, what's the most important thing I want to show off in this application? Where's the biggest benefit going to come when it comes to setting things up? Is it how I write better code, or is it adding more functionality, or which functionality? So if you don't want to be spoiled, pause the video right now and think it through. But what we're going to do next is we're going to add the ability to make post calls, not just get, but post as well. Not everything, not patch, put, and delete. Don't bite off too big a chunk. Just do post. And so what we're going to do is next time we're going to set that up, which means changing the UI, changing our library, and changing how we do calls and even how we display data. So with all of that, I want you to think through, how would you expect this to work? Okay. And then build that out. So update the application to also allow you to make post calls, not just get calls. And then I'll come back with another video on how to do that next.